السلام عليكم ورحمة الله ما فهم.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Let me get this clicked up.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Imam.
Alaikum assalam, Abdulaziz, to you as well. All right. That's it up there. Alhamdulillah.
Yarmukallah.
Shukran. It's a bit much. Okay. That's what I'm trying to do.
Brother Imam, please help me. Because I hate I missed last week. Oh, but that's right. Yeah, it's on Facebook, right?
It's on YouTube, yeah. Probably Facebook too, yeah. Inshallah. Yeah, what I've done is posted it up using StreamYard afterwards. So yeah, you'll be inshallah tomorrow. I'll post this up as well. Let me take this out and get straight here. Welcome to everybody. And so what do I need to do? Trying to get my co-host straight. Let's see what I need to do, Tyson.
If you go to participants, when you click on that.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Gotcha. My co-host. Great. All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, welcome to everyone. And we're really happy to continue this journey. It's just so absolutely wonderful to have my co-host who needs no introduction. I see everyone present here. Abdul Shakur, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone present here is familiar with Tyson Amir, and you're going to become increasingly more familiar. And the more I, just preparing each week, I have to prepare for this. I have the long form has actually been done, but the details for the day, and especially after whatever happened in the previous week, the fineness of it and the significance of it continues to be reinforced on me, and especially as obvious as it may sound, especially the history is just so very important. And it's so easy to be absent of that history, but I'm not going to keep talking about that right now. I'm going to make way for Tyson Amir, for him to take us further. And I think we're about at that stage where he said, who needs no further introduction. So we're at that stage now. So it's all on you. Do the whole spotlight thing and everything, the way you want to set it up. You do that, all right? All right.
And that sounds good.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, so it's an honor again to be here, and I'll start out with that every time because it only makes sense based on what we're doing. I am a relatively young man who raised up in the 80s and the 90s. Therefore, a lot of the elders that were extremely influential in my life were active in the 60s and the 70s. So the book that I'm using right now to add just an extra little flavor to what we're doing over the next couple of weeks is a book I published, Carry On Tradition, came out May 19th, which was Malcolm's birthday. And my life, for real, my upbringing, my experience, my identity, my foundation is based on tradition that brothers and sisters in our community established. It was passed on to them. They built these very important institutions, these important cultural realities, these manifestations of an understanding of who they were, a practice of their faith. And it showed up in our community in such a powerful way that a young man such as myself, who wasn't there for that, but what I heard, what I saw in the people who were there for that was so influential to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we do. That's who we are as a people. And so I wanted to be able to tell that story on a much bigger level. And so that was part of the inspiration for the book. And so what I'm going to do today is recap briefly some of what we talked about last week and then get into a very important chapter of the text. All of them are important chapters, but I'm going to get into a historical figure who I think is really important for all of us to know, because everybody in this text exemplifies this tradition to the highest degree, but his story is so important. All right, so last week we had a chance to begin to tour the text. So the text is called Carry On Tradition. We talked a little bit about this moment here. And so in the book, this is the very first part of the story of Carry On Tradition. And what I'm doing, I'm depicting this historical moment in 1441, in the year 1441. This is a historical reimagination of the first encounter between Portuguese and West Africans. So on this ship, there are two Portuguese captains who will hop off this boat. They'll go on shore, and at the end of this encounter, they forcibly and violently kidnap 12 West Africans, put them back on that boat, take them back to Portugal, and they become the first 12 West Africans that are forcibly enslaved in the historical epoch, which is going to become known in Western sources as the transatlantic slave trade. And in some of our sources, we refer to it as the Ma'afa, the Great Tragedy. So this is that first moment. To me, this is important because this is the beginning of our tradition. What we've done with Imam Fahim in the Rise experience, we've been talking about the tradition of the practice of Islam in our people, going all the way back to the beginning of the tradition. I mean, we looked at stuff from Quran, we looked at stuff from the history of the prophetic community, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about how the very first community that was a safeguard and gave refuge to the emerging and the burgeoning community of Muslims in Islam was the community of Abyssinia, a community of melanated Black people. And that was intentional because Allah's wisdom, these people are going to take care of this. And they're going to take care of it in a way where it will be able to flourish, while in the homeland of the tradition where it was born, where the Prophet was at, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Mecca, it was being attacked. Some of the followers were being attacked. So it's just important for us to know our tradition and what we do, what our people have done and what we stand on. So I wanted to begin here and start telling that story, and then begin to get more into the nuances of who we are in that. So this happened. This happened in the year 1441. But what often doesn't get focused on is what our people did. And this is what the text is about. So we get into the response to 1441. So I talked about how both of those captains who were responsible for that initial voyage, they come back. and they tried to do more raiding of the West African coast. But our people were ready because they witnessed the brutality that took place in that first encounter. And they were like, that's not going to happen to us ever again. If these people come, they're going to see how we respond. So the first captain, he comes back for a second time. He's successful in capturing West Africans, taking them back to Portugal. He comes back for a third time and make it out of the African continent, because this is what happened to him. This is a recreation of what happened to him. So based on historical sources, we know his ship was attacked. It was destroyed. Everybody on the ship was killed. It was burned down because our people said, we ain't gonna let you do this to our community. And then I had talked about there were two captains on that ship. The second captain did the same thing. He came back for another raiding voyage. He was successful in that second voyage. He came back a third time. That was the end of his story, because this happened to him as well. Our people said, we are not going to allow you to exploit, to violate, to attack, to enslave our people. We will not do that. And the response was so powerful that the royal family of Portugal, specifically the historical figure known as Prince Henry the Navigator, he made a decree saying, we're not going to send any more ships to the African continent because it's too costly. We've lost too many lives. So he put a ban on those journeys for several years. That's important history. Then we continued from there and we talked about this. So what I did in the very first section of the book, I talked about the creation or the birth of our tradition, which is in that first moment of 1441. We resisted from day one. I talk about that response to that initial moment of 1441. Then I started talking about how our ancestors ended up being forcibly removed from the African continent and the ways that they resisted there. So we got into this conversation about the way that rebellion at sea took place. And we had rebellions that happened on the coast. So before our brothers and sisters were put on those ships, of course, we had rebellions that took place aboard ships as the ships were on the Atlantic. And another thing that happened, there were multiple planned rebellions where people were paying attention to the way that these Western Europeans were moving as they were trying to put our brothers and sisters on those boats. They would attack. They had coordinated attacks. All right, they'll be moving at dawn, or they're going to be moving at this time. We're going to run up on them and we're going to attack to get our brothers and sisters free. So many of us, the way that we get taught that history, it's just devoid of so much of that context. And I thought that it was important for us to see that because this is part of the tradition of our resistance. All right, then we continued, and then we got into the tradition of the very first major collective rebellion. So if I wanted to start talking about smaller rebellions and uprisings or individual acts of rebellion and uprising, that would have happened the very first moment that our people ended up here in the Western Hemisphere as a result of Western Europeans. But I wanted to point to collective action. Like in our conversation over the past few weeks, we talked about the development of the Nation of Islam. It's a community. We talked about leadership in the nation. We spent time talking about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now we're talking about Imam Mohammed. When you have a community behind you and you move with a community mindset, that's different. And it's important for us to see that. The individual acts are important for us to see. The small group acts are important for us to see. The large community acts are important for us to see. And so that was something that I really wanted to highlight. So that's what comes up in this tradition of Santo Domingo. So that's modern day Haiti. So we gave some history to the native and the indigenous people of that island. It's important for us to talk about them. We don't just overwrite their story, just like Western sources and white folks want to try to overwrite our story in their books and the way that they discuss who we are. Now, we're not going to do that to other people. So we pay respect and homage to the original inhabitants to that land. So that's the first piece. Then we begin to have this breakdown of what Spanish colonization on the island of Haiti looked like. Okay, so we get that. Then we get into the experience of our brothers and sisters in Haiti as a result of Spanish colonization. So we start talking about what was it like for our African brothers and sisters who were there in the early 1500s. Sources are different. Some will talk about that they were African brothers and sisters that there as early as like 1498, 1499. Some will say 1500, some will say 1501. But anyway, Columbus, 1492, Africans ended up there right after that. So we speak to that. Then we get into the story of the first major collective rebellion. And the way that I depicted this, I have this brother and this sister here. And they were known as, right here, I'll highlight it down at the bottom, Maria, Olafa, and Gonzalo Mandinga. And both were supposedly from the Wolof people. And they were the ones who were known as the organizers, the strategists, who were able to bring everybody together. They picked the time, they picked the day, they came up with the attack strategy. They led their brothers and sisters in this uprising and this rebellion in order to free their people. This is part of our tradition, y'all. You know what I'm saying? This is 1521. Organized it, led it, executed it. Where did it take place? It took place on the plantation owned by Christopher Columbus's son. So his son's name was Diego Colon. The plantation was known as Nueva Isabella. And they executed this uprising in order to completely obliterate the institution of forced enslavement of all of their brothers and sisters. They weren't just fighting for themselves to be free. They were trying to get rid of the entire system. Like, we don't want this to affect anybody. So to end the system of forced enslavement, to liberate all their brothers and sisters, and of course, to reclaim land that was taken by these colonizers and liberate that land for
Brother
the native
Imam,
and
his
indigenous people and
audio
for
has went
themselves.
out.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me know when my audio comes back in. Can y'all hear
There's
me now?
no audio.
We can hear you.
You can, so y'all, you can
Yeah.
hear me still?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I'll continue then.
We can't.
So
I
hopefully
can't
for
hear you. You have no audio.
Abdulaziz, can you hear me?
Your audio is out.
No, your audio is out. So, okay, look. So, Abdullah, okay, everybody else, hit the chat if you can hear. Just hit the chat, yes, if you can hear. You see that, Amir? Test Tyson.
yeah, I can hear people saying that they heard me.
Okay, so you go on. I'll let him know that. I'll text him, let him know that's on him.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right.
So we get this uprising of Santo Domingo. This takes place 1521, and then every one of these
No
chapters ends with a
audio.
legacy.
There's
Bro,
no.
they can hear me. They can hear me.
I see you moving, but I can't hear you.
All right. I'm gonna continue. So in the legacy section, we just do a summary of what
Tyson, hold up.
happened in that historical event.
Because he's gonna keep talking. Let me get him on the phone and get him to stop talking.
Okay. All right. I'll stop real quick.
Everybody take a breather. Type in a little note on the chat on how much you appreciate it and la 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 la, and all the rest of that. Okay.
Yes, brother,
Yes,
man.
brother. Okay, so mute your Zoom right now.
Mute my Zoom. Okay. Let me get back to
Do you hear me?
I can hear you good, brother, man.
Abdulaziz.
Yes, I hear you good. I hear you good.
Okay, Tyson, go ahead.
I'm doing that. So as we were saying, the legacy part comes in and it speaks to the importance, the impact, and then of course, the way that that tradition was established in that time and how brothers and sisters inspired by that tradition carried it forward. And we'll come back to this, inshallah, in the future. But an important piece for us to understand is that this is Haiti. You know what I'm saying? So what these brothers and sisters did in 1521 is a foundational piece that leads to the Haitian Revolution, which starts in 1791. So that's 270 years later, close to 270 years later, this important step made on behalf of our people moved them that much closer to their freedom and their liberation. And then the events of the Haitian Revolution take place from 1791 to 1804, and Haiti becomes the first country in the Western Hemisphere in the era of Western European imperialism and colonization to free itself. You know what I'm saying? They were standing on the tradition of these brothers and sisters right here. And I think that's such, for me as a student of history, when I see that, especially when I see that in our people, that's so beautiful. Our people never stopped. We're talking about the different generations or the different phases of the experience of the Nation of Islam. Started out, Imam Fahim was talking about in that first phase, it was like wudu for us, preparing us to get to the door. Imam Wadath he comes in, he takes us through that door, prepares us as we move into this next phase. And then we're going to be moving into this phase of Renaissance, and we're continuing to evolve our experience. That is tradition. And so in our history, this is a major part of our tradition as well. And that tradition being inspired by the ways that our brothers and sisters stood up, fought back, resisted in order for us to be free. And then the last piece that I want to bring to y'all today is this one. This brother right here, Gaspar Young. So as an individual, his story is important. But he also has this collective responsibility because he becomes a leader of a community. So Gaspar Young, this is the way that I depicted the brother. So according to the historical records, he is from the Kingdom of Gabon. He has royal lineage, but he was captured, just like a number of other brothers and sisters from the African continent. He was taken to the Western Hemisphere to be forcibly enslaved in Central America, in modern-day Mexico. So in the history of Mexico, some of y'all might be familiar with that. I don't know how many of you traveled to Mexico. If you've been to the southern part of Mexico, you'll be in an area known as Veracruz. If you're in the Veracruz area, you'll see a lot of Black folks because that's where our people were. Other parts of the country as well, but especially in the Veracruz area. So in the 1500s, his brother's there, but he knew that was not his reality. I'm not a slave. I'm a free person. I don't accept these people's authority. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to free myself. So he frees himself with a number of his brothers and sisters. They end up escaping to this other territory within modern day Mexico, and they engage in an armed resistance against the Spanish colonial authority for 3+ decades. They fight. They are ambushing their caravans. So if we're thinking about the history of the prophetic community and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the Muslims left Mecca and they end up in Medina, in the way that they would target the caravans that were going to Mecca. That's part of what they did. Seriously. You know what I'm saying? Like, are y'all trying to get supplies and resources? Nah, ain't nothing going there. We're going to take that for ourselves. So then the Spanish authorities would come and try to find them on their land and fight them. Gaspar Yanga, military strategist, a charismatic leader, inspired his people. No, we need to defend ourselves. Fought for 3+ decades. And in the end of that fight, the Spanish were like, we can't keep doing this. We cannot keep fighting them because we can't beat them. So what happens? They negotiate a treaty with Gaspar and his people. They say, we'll stop fighting. We will respect the freedom of you, your people, and the land that you all are now on. We will also honor the freedom of all of your descendants. There's a brother, 1500s, supposed to be, again, relying on the way that they want to tell our stories, a slave. Nah, fam, we're going to be free. And I'm going to do everything in my power to try to free all of my brothers and sisters around me. And if it requires us to stand up and fight, then we're going to stand up and fight. And if it requires us to stand up and fight for more than a day, we're going to do that. As I said, for 3+ decades, they did this because their goal was a righteous goal. We deserve to be free. We want to see the end to this evil institution. So Gaspar is known, as a result of this treaty, as the first liberator. In Spanish, they call him El Primero Libertador, the first liberator. Because in the history of imperialism and colonization by Western Europeans, so of course the Spanish come over, then you get the Portuguese, you get the French, you get the Dutch, you get the British, colonizing the entire Western Hemisphere. So in that area, that era of Western European colonization, who was the first person to liberate a piece of land that these Europeans took from native and indigenous people? A Black man. Gaspar Yanga, who's celebrated still in the history of Mexico as a hero, as a national hero. If you're in the Veracruz area, if you go to the city that is known as San Lorenzo de los Negros, that's the city that he established, there are statues to him, or based on him and based on this history. The very popular statue that they have for him is a proud statue of a Black man holding a spear, and then in his other hand, he has like some chains that are broken because he broke himself out of enslavement, broke his people out of enslavement, and established this new community of free and liberated people. And that history existed, and that treaty lasted all the way up until Mexico fought its war of independence from Spain, so became an independent nation, and then abolished slavery. So this is up into the 1820s, 1830s. So some of y'all might be familiar with that history. The second president of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero, who was also a Black man. He was Black, he was indigenous, and he had colonial blood in him, but he identified as a Black man, the second president of Mexico. He abolished slavery. And this happens way before the 13th Amendment gets added to the Constitution in the United States. So when we look at the impact of our people and tradition that we establish is deep, y'all. And if we don't know these folks, we need to. Because just like we're studying our history from the Nation of Islam to the leadership of Imam Mohammed to where we are now and what we're trying to build for our next generations to come, and how that tradition inspires us so much and we're carrying that tradition on. You just need to know the tradition of our people here in the Western Hemisphere, whether they were in South America, the Caribbean, Central America, North America, because it's such rich, powerful, deep history. So Take some time. Whether it's reading it in Carry On Tradition, or you just go online and be like, who's this cat, Gaspar Younger? Look him up if you don't know him, and make sure that our young people know of this tradition. But his story's powerful. And so next time, inshallah, we'll talk about somebody else, because there's so many stories like this within our history, within our community, of brothers and sisters coming together saying, we got to do what we need to do for our people to be right, for our people to be free. So, Imam, Fahim, that's what I wanted to share this morning. All right, well, the Imam, he'll be on soon. I don't know if anybody has a question they want to throw in the chat or just to ask anything about that. Let
Yeah,
me know.
you all go ahead. I'm trying to get Abdulaziz back in. So just go ahead, okay? Did you hear me?
Yes, I did. I was just reading something that's in the chat right now.
Okay.
Brother Abdul Shakur, he was saying 60, he's in his 6th decade, spent many years incarcerated, read a tremendous amount of books, but had never read this history. MashaAllah. And that's also part of the reason why I felt it was important to create this, because I think there's a lot of us that are in that position. I remember the first time I learned about Gaspar Younger, maybe 8, 10 years ago, if that. I was like, why hadn't I heard of this brother before? Anybody else with a quick reflection on this brother's story or any of the other history, how it connects to what we're talking about? So real quick, I'll add this piece in there with that treaty. So I had that picture up there of an older Gaspar Younger, because I was telling you, 3 decades, a committed fight. In the treaty, these were the terms of the treaty. So first, a recognition of the freedom of Gaspar Younger and his people and the land that they were on. Autonomy and governance, so that they had their freedom and they had the right to govern themselves politically. So they built their own self-sufficient community that was based on their own leadership, that they would be protected from the institution of enslavement that the Spanish were still engaging in the territory or in the land that was Mexico, that there would be peaceful coexistence between the Spanish colonial regime and the community being led by Gaspar Younger, that there was also recognition of Yanga's leadership. So then eventually when Gaspar passes away, the leadership goes to some of his descendants, and then there are some other people who take on leadership, but they maintain this community for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then that they also had economic rights, that they could engage in trade, so they could stay self-sufficient and independent. I mean, it's just powerful. This is what was negotiated, but not negotiated in the sense of they're asking this from the Spanish because they fought in such a powerful way for so many years. The Spanish just wanted an end to the fighting because they couldn't stop this community. So they're like, well, what do y'all want? What do y'all need? This is everything. And then, of course, just because it was written on paper, wasn't like Gaspar Yanga's people celebrated that victory. They stayed on that. Like, this is what we had agreed to. This is what it says in our treaty. And so they were still ready to fight in the event that the Spanish wanted to violate that treaty. And this is just one example, y'all, of our history, for real. There's so much more that we can get into, and it's just a deep, rich, powerful tradition. So as the brother Abdul Shakur was saying, like, this is his first time hearing about this information. I want to make sure our young people get this as soon as possible so they can be inspired by this history instead of the way that our history is being told to us. just like we're being inspired by everything that Imam Fahim is leading us through right now. So Imam, if you're ready, I'll fall back again.
All right, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, keep your eye on the whatever the participant chat. It looked like he might have made it back in because I see one that's been added. But let me tell you, Abdulaziz, good people. I know him well from Jackson, Mississippi, from Oakland, California, from so all that, he's about it. He wants to get it, and so anything that interrupts his flow is like, and nothing in the world makes sense until he gets straight on that. So don't be hard on him on that. But inshallah, send him another link. So inshallah, perhaps he's back and he's aware now that if you have a problem, put it in the chat. Don't speak into the recording. But okay, life goes on. That's family business. So alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. So again, that what we're getting from Tyson is what we signed up for. I thank Allah. So let me get on to our portion today. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So let's share here. I decided to start breaking these up in episodes because, mashallah, it's no boast, it's whatever. It's no virtue signaling. I think sometimes that's the language. It's like I don't know where this ends in the context of time frame. So I just decided, okay, well, let's just break it up in episodes. So last week was episode 1 of this portion. This week is episode 2. It's the last resurrection and the Renaissance. So that's when all is said and done. We're trying to get to that end where we say, okay, where does it go from? We know where we are. That is, we feel and we have a sense. We are present. We're conscious of where we are right now, this being 2024 on the solar calendar. And we're in a few days, we're going to transition into 1446, I believe, on the Islamic calendar. And frankly, in the scheme of God's time, this is recent. This is recent. We can talk about, 400 years, 500 years. In God's time frame, this is briefly. This just started happening right now. This is the birth. This is actually the embryonic phase of the future that we are moving towards. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are a part of that inception. I mean, literally, we are a part of the inception of the final phase of God's plan. And I know for some, it's just natural. I can't be upset with people who say, "Oh, he's doing too much." In terms of that, I get it. I understand because you don't have the background. I got to stop talking about this part so we can move on to the next part, and so you can see, mashallah, inshallah, what I see and others see because of, by virtue of this particular history. But when Allah said, "Inni ja'ilu fil ardi khalifa," I don't see any other signs in modern history that has more right to the claim of being that final product. And I know there's much conceptualization to be done there, but that's a whole nother subject. But I want you to understand that when I come and what we do, it's like, okay, well, that's what's operating in the back of his mind. He's wanting to get to that point where that can be made plain. But without the benefit of the context of this particular history, it would be difficult to appreciate that except as hyperbole or just plain craziness. Okay, I get it. So it's like, okay, I'm there. So let's move on. So to continue this, Imam Mohammed said, I am the seventh child. My father was born in October. I was born in October. October in astrology is the month for the leader. This is true. Scorpio is a leadership sign. My father was born in October. I was born in October. Scorpio, Scorpio. Now I'm showing you signs. I could go on showing you signs, that's misspelled, signs for a long time, but I'm concluding it on this. Now, Scorpio, he has a tail that he can turn into a circle. In other words, he can complete what's behind him. And not only that, Scorpio's tail is in Scorpio's weapon is in his tail. His tail is also his weapon. His tail, his deadly weapon is in his tail, and they have used that as a sign for leadership. Now, we know Khalifa means the one who comes from behind. If you say that to any Arab, if he is looking for something, and you say Khalfan from Khalifa, say Khalfan, he knows you mean it's behind you. He will turn around and look behind him for what he's looking for. So Khalifa means the one who addresses attention from behind. The great leaders are those leaders who look behind and pick up history before they go forward. If you move out and you don't know the history of what is behind you, buddy, you ain't no leader. You're going out in the dark. So a good leader, he wants to know what's behind him. He wants to know history. Now, this is Imam Mohammed, 1982, Masjid Malcolm Shabazz. Tyson, you got a couple of bars for that symbol that we got on the screen right now? Just a couple of bars if you do.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I got a little something. Let me see. I'll say, we on mission, trying to carry on tradition. See, I know the government, listen, they fighting for extradition. They're wishing my right to the First Amendment be rescinded. Because when I'm penning these lyrics, the brothers and sisters in tenements hear it. They look in the mirror. They start feeling fearless. They follow me, marching down the block. Marcus Garvey appearing in the flesh for the second time. It's red, black, and green on the crest. Black star line. We've been oppressed because they've been obsessed. They've been trying to suppress this intellect since Imhotep, the architect, but we stay building. I'll stop there.
Alhamdulillah. So that another thing to speak about, I got to move on, but to speak about, esoteric language, originally when human beings, when we first, I'm talking about the time of the beginning of human language. From the time of the beginning of human language, older languages, when I say older, let's call them ancient language, since we're talking about the beginning of language, was more rhyming. The languages themselves, inside the language themselves, the communication between people who spoke a given language, it was effectively rhyming because that was easier to remember. In the nature of human speech, it's later that the human speech was less rhyming because we had moved to the point where the cognitive developments were different. So alhamdulillah, and that's also one of the reasons we should probably see also between rap and hip hop and poetry itself, how it is so gripping. And the better it is, the more gripping it is. And then when you put it to music, the instrumentality, it just becomes absolutely riveting, right? So that's why we have to get our concepts, principles, ideas, and values using that same vehicle, because that is the vehicle that's also being used to destroy us. if in fact we don't know how to check it or know where its power lies and be able to thereby resist it. So that's very important. And now, in fact, it reminds me of another thing. This is WD Muhammad type talk, right here, just to move on, because it comes up just spontaneously because we think that way, right? In the slang, which slang is also esoteric language. Meaning there's a jargon which is understood by a smaller circle of people as opposed to the general public. Exoteric is general public type language. Esoteric is language that's understood by a few. Slang is esoteric. Slang is esoteric language. See, and that's also why when the youngsters hear the music, the hip hop, the rap, blah blah blah, it's like they get it. There's like they can hear it. The rest of us are like, what did he say? What is he talking about? Why were they so excited about that? Well, because they speak the language. We don't speak the language. But the slang, and that's also known by the elite masters and the wardens, I'm going to say now with what's coming. The wardens of this society, they also know that language. They also put terms into the language that gets mixed in with the organic, authentic, soul-born, let's say, spirit from those who the masters put on, let's call it labels, et cetera, but then they also inject, that is the elite, they inject their stuff in there. So yeah, add this to, and then now it's out there, but the ones who understand the key to that terminology, they say, yeah, they're singing a song about this and that, but for us, it means this, that, or the other, and they communicate to each other through those that they use as donkeys to carry their message. Just someone said we have to do a whole piece on that. What am I trying to get to? Bars. I said you got a couple of bars, right? Bars. Okay, we already know bars. People go into bars to get drunk. That's one thing. But then also bars are also what's used on prison cells, right? So you get locked in, and we talked about it. Actually, I think we even mentioned it last week, how language is also a chain. It's a chain, and you know how important chains are in the rap game, right? So it's also bars and chains. It's a whole new different kind of enslavement there. But the point is that it's enslavement if you don't know if you're totally unconscious and unaware of what's going on. And so when we talk about mummification and rap itself, again, khair and shar, there's the beneficial and there's the harmful. We want to go toward the beneficial, stay away from the harmful. Dawa itself, in the history of Al-Islam, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., they utilize what was popular at that time in that place as a vehicle for moving the message. And again, Malaysia and Indonesia use them as an example. Is to say this is what can happen using that methodology, using that strategy. In Malaysia, for example, wayang kulit. We good, y'all. This is all part of history. Wayang kulit puppet shows. That's what it was. It's like the Muslims showed up on their boats or whatever, say, okay, we're at this spot. Okay, this is what we're going to set up. We're going to do. What these people doing? Everybody locked in on a puppet show. I mean, locked in like we would watch TV or theater or anything else. That was their social media. And so the Muslims said, we can make our own shows, but with our message, different message, right? And so, okay, fast forward to 2024. Okay, what are we doing? Because all eyes are on this, that, and the other, social media, what have you. Social media is killing us. Okay, better learn how to use that so that you can benefit and even protect those that are with you now, who constitute your future, and therefore your future. Let's move on. So this bird image right here is the Sankofa. Sankofa. Yeah, I started thinking about my brother uh, seafood. Mohammed Sharif, yes, Mohammed Sharif, uh, Sankori Institute. But this is Sankofa bird. And the Sankofa bird is actually symbolizing the very thing that the Imam is talking about. You see some of the images of that bird. You see it flying with his head turned back, with the egg in his mouth. And so that's what leadership is. I'm sorry. Many other places, Imam says, you got to turn around and go back and get what you forgot. You have to turn around. You got to go get what you forgot, and that's the leadership. What the leadership has to do. Tyson, since I kind of going off the rails, and what I'm doing, I'm gonna recognize your hand, but let me see. Go ahead. This is I'm making an exception in this case, and I'm going to go back to what I'm doing. Tyson, are you trying to say something, or what? What are we doing?
No, my mistake, man.
Okay, all right. Well, glad you're here. Either way, yeah, all right. All right, let me get back on. Well, I'm not off track. I'm just, you know me. Come on now, y'all know me well enough. Let's go. So this is what the Imam is saying, and even when we listen to, as we continue to listen to Tyson speak of carry on tradition, it's just absolutely, this is doing the right thing at the right time in the right way so that we can get that history that we missed, because we have to connect these dots, right? Yeah, let me give you a college phrase for that. Diachronic continuity. Most of what we suffer from in the so-called American Negro is diachronic discontinuity. Diachronic means across time. Discontinuity is broken. We're separate. There's a timeline that was broken, and so much of what's behind us, it's like we're going forward without that. We're existing without that. How can you be a whole person and you have amnesia regarding everything? Anything beyond here, I have no memory of. How can that person be healthy? Let's move, Fahim. So we talked about. So now we're continuing on this strategy. The Imam said, and we quoted him last week, that I'm a product of an experiment, at least of an experience, but more of an experiment. And we talked about Laszlo Polgar, who's there on the left, who produced the first women international chess champions, where before the idea was that women they don't have the mind, they don't have the mentality, the cognitive wherewithal to be able to be chess champions. Well, he disproved that with his daughters, who he took from a very early age, and some of them even began the aspiration for them before their birth. And the rest is history. The Polgar sisters, you can look those up and get the details there. And then, of course, we have Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena, which we detailed last week, who also wrote an 85-page plan before they were born for them to become tennis aces. And there's a documentary on that very subject, Raising Tennis Aces. And so this is all his aspiration for them, which worked out, was lived out, and became a reality. And of course, you have Farad there in the middle, which this is what we're speaking to right now. We are at the inside of the outer end of him. Give a couple of other examples where this has occurred. Leopold Mozart and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Let me say this before going on. Amadeus, that video, that movie, Amadeus. If you want to understand Iblis and Shaitan, if you want to understand how Iblis and Shaitan evolved and works, etc., it's a 3-hour movie. But if you have the time, you can really get an understanding of, oh, that's how Iblis became Shaitan, and be able to see it in the human manifestation. The movie is Amadeus. Leopold Mozart was a composer. This is his father, who was a composer and a music teacher, meticulously trained his son, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, from a very young age. Leopold recognized Wolfgang's musical talent early on and dedicated himself to developing his son's ability, resulting in Wolfgang becoming one of the most celebrated composers in history. Of course, there's Tiger Woods, right? You have Earl Woods and Tiger Woods. Earl Woods was a former Green Beret and baseball player, introduced his son Tiger to golf at an early age. Earl coached and mentored Tiger with a rigorous training regimen and mental conditioning, aiming to make him a golf champion. Tiger Woods went on to become one of the greatest golfers of all times. So here are aspirationals where the father had this idea and the mother was involved, obviously, as well, and the products that came from it. Now, here's a big important piece that that needs to be in our consciousness, in our awareness, to appreciate it. A part of me now, whether it's I believe it is appropriate to let you know. I want you all to know, quote, what I know. What drives some of what drives my conviction, my commitment, my perception, my motivation in this regard. You know, what makes you, if someone was to ask the question, what makes you, Fahim, so certain that this that has occurred and continues to unfold is anything other than charlatan, cult-driven crap? It's like, what makes you think it's more that? So it's like, that's what this whole story continues to respond to, those kinds of questions. Because one of those things is, it's natural. It's natural for somebody. Seen some Facebook note just before I came on. Someone was saying that, you know, Nation of Islam was a prison, and spiritual prison, material prison. Yeah, that's true. But see, the person who was making the statement, his tone was a little bit different, right? I can say, yeah, that was true. But in your tone, you're saying that's all it was. Well, that's because of a misperception, misinterpretation of the whole thing. This is what the Imam said. It's like, it's going to look like that, and it'll come up later, this statement in full. It'll come up, he said, yeah, it's going to look like that if you don't know the strategy. So it's like, if you don't know the strategy, okay, well, that's just straight falsehood. Okay, and you can see an example as to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has left that in front of us. So it's like, look, whenever you come upon this is what explains that. And that is when Moses was traveling with the wise men. When Moses was traveling with the wise man, Moses was just using the rules. That's it. It's like, look, if this is black, this is white. There ain't no gray area in none of this. It's like, you do this, you're wrong. You do that, you're right. And that was what the wise man was seeking, to elevate Moses above this rules-based thinking. And that's what happens to those people who critique the Nation of Islam, who critique Imam Mohammed, and they critique them just based on the rules, of which they've learned a couple of them. And so therefore now they feel themselves qualified to judge the whole thing. The Imam said, you're going to misjudge it if you don't understand the strategy behind it. So likewise, the wise man told Moses, he said, you can't be patient with me. He said, oh yeah, he said, how can you be patient with that about which your understanding is not yet complete? So the point is, people don't understand what is this and what was that and where does it fit in the scheme of reality? So all of our conversation is about doing that. One aspect, if you just take it as a phrase, okay, what I say, you need to understand what is the meaning of the noble lie. Right? Look at the history of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. It's just a fact. I always want to give you these little bits that are from the Islamic sources. So you can look up the history where Abraham, quote unquote, lied on 3 occasions. All right. You look it up. I didn't bring it for memory's purposes, but I'm satisfied. You can do your own and look it up. So Imam Joel, I saw you there. If you have the opportunity to put that into your own search base to find the occasion where Abraham lied on 3 occasions. If you can find and get that link and throw it up. And anybody else who can do it. Imam Joel, we just on a different thing. So that's one. And and this, so in the Quran, since I'm here, in the Quran, the piece, because the other one I'm thinking about more, I'm thinking of the hadith, but in the Quran, Abraham, quote unquote, he didn't lie. But he didn't, quote unquote, he didn't say what actually happened in direct answer to. He broke up all the idols, blah, 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 and put the axe on the big one, right? So whenever who did this to our guys? Abraham said, well, ask the big one. Since he can talk, ask the big one, right? So that was a strategy, right? So he destroyed property that was not his own, which in black and white terms, that would be deemed to be wrong, if you will. But because he's on Tawheed, right, that is like the right thing to do is to smash these idols. But then I also have a strategy because I didn't smash that one. I should have smashed all of them if that was what I was purely going for. How come I didn't smash all of them? Because I was trying to teach the people something through this. So he had a strategy. All right. So the whole issue of understanding conceptually the noble lie. I'm about to read the details from Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown's book, Misquoting Mohammed, which is a very important book. I say all of you should read it. If you ever have issues and you feel, it's like you always run into those, no hadith people or something like that, they say, nothing, I don't, none of that, Quran only. And then he explains all that inside of that. And you can understand, you can get the background of when that movement started, why that movement started, the foundation for its reasoning and assumptions, blah, blah. All right, so let's move on. So I'm saying as a note, for those of you who are note-taking, a critical thing to understand the strategy of Farad Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, and what goes with that is understanding the philosophical concept of the noble lie. You need to know that. Now, this is from Dr. Brown's book. Plato charts his plan for an ideal society, ideal state, where justice is achieved and maintained through each organ of society's body performing its proper function. This ideal state will consist of 3 classes performing different tasks, with children being moved from one to another if they are better suited for it than the class into which they were born. They will accept their assignment without objection, and however, basically, because they were all told a noble lie from a young age. Now, modern movies that actually do that, there are many others, but these are the ones that come to mind in reading this. I need to tell you this because it'll give you a way of understanding. Modern day illustrations of this very situation. Ender's Game, It has to do with young people and the manipulation of young people by a lie. Maze Runner. The byline, one of the bylines in it is, it's a play on the word, but it's actually, byline is wicked is good. Wicked is good. And these are all the